Hallo alle zusammen, schönen guten Abend. Es ist Montagabend, Livestream-Zeit bei Irish Whiskies und heute habe ich wieder jemanden aus Irland zu Gast und freue mich sehr, denn es ist eine neue Marke aus Irland und ich glaube, das wird für uns alle heute ein sehr interessantes Gespräch. Hello Maurice, great to
Good
have you on my
evening.
stream. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
very,
for taking your time.
thank you very much for having me, and thank you for accommodating my English rather than German. I learned German as a schoolboy, but it is not up to this. So
Okay. So we will go ahead with English. That's no problem. New
good.
people know they can ask questions and comment in German, and I will translate. That's no problem.
Thank you.
So Maurice, you have a new Irish brand, The Liberator,
That's
a new
right.
Irish company, Wayward Spirits, and we all would really love to know a bit more about your brand and what are you doing.
Lovely. Thank you. I'm the co-founder of Wayward Irish Spirits. We're the makers of the Liberator Irish Whiskey, which is this whiskey here. Um, it's been a long time in the planning, but we launched this year on February the 29th, straight into Ireland's COVID lockdown, which wasn't the greatest way to launch a new business, but you have to
Not
adapt
really.
and these things. So the first release was the Liberator malt whiskey in tawny port finish, the inaugural release, which has sold out. But I did keep a few bottles back for Marika, so you will be tasting those in the Irish Whiskey weekend coming up in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks' time, yes.
Yeah, but in the whiskey weekend, we will taste batch 2. So batch 1
Okay.
is not released yet. It will be released tonight after the stream. So
Okay.
we have some bottles of the batch
Right.
1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason for starting the business, my family has been involved in the drinks business for quite a while. We're an old Irish family. In about 1450, we started off in a place along the coast from here called Ballycarbery Castle in 1450, and our business there was at that time was importing wines and spirits from Spain and Portugal. This carried on quite happily for hundreds of years until about 1650, when the English sacked the castle and we had to move up the coast. And this coincided in 1661 with the English bringing in excise duty, which is a tax on spirits. So being Wayward Kerryman and being O'Connells, we didn't really think that the fact that somebody else had decided to tax what we were doing as a good reason to stop what we were doing. So we carried on, and what we were doing became smuggling for the next couple of hundred years. So where we were based was a place called Derrynane, which is an ideal spot if you want to be smuggling. It's a harbour that's hidden from natural harbour that's hidden from the sea, surrounded by mountains, and basically it was an O'Connell kingdom. Nobody could get in there. The revenue men couldn't get in, and the times that they did get in, they didn't maybe leave. They weren't allowed to leave very alive. And the family built up quite a business over the centuries, and we were importing um, wine, spirits, luxury goods from Spain, France, and the family had a lot of cousins in France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere, and we would have been trading with them and importing luxury goods into Ireland. And the family's customer base would have been the gentry of Kerry, the judges and the magistrates. So we were sort of fairly, and they didn't want their supply chain interrupted. So that helped us keep ahead of the revenue for a long time. The goods we were importing, luxury goods, but in the other direction, there would have been young men going across to the continent to earn to earn their livelihoods and to advance in the professions, because Catholics in Ireland at that time, up until the 1820s, weren't allowed to be in the army above a certain rank or to be in any of the professions. So sons would go off to make their fortunes abroad. So it was quite sad in that respect. But we built up quite a big business up until about the early 1800s, under one of my ancestors, who was another Maurice O'Connell, known as Hunting Cap, Maurice Hunting Cap O'Connell. And he had a fleet of about 8 ships going to and fro from the continent. And it was into this family that my most famous ancestor, a guy called Daniel O'Connell, was born, and he's quite a significant figure in Irish history. There's lots of O'Connell streets in Ireland, including the main street in Dublin, which is O'Connell Street, and there's a Daniel O'Connell statue there, and O'Connell bridges. There are loads of O'Connells all over the place.
Yes.
So
have you seen here the Kevin O'Connell? He's living here in Germany, an Irishman in Germany.
Well done, Kevin. And we're probably related.
Yeah, maybe.
My father always used to tell me that you always have to assume in Ireland that people are related to you unless they prove otherwise. It's a very small country and everyone is related. So Daniel O'Connell was the original civil rights campaigner. He fought for civil rights for Irishmen, and he got the vote for the Irish Catholics, which was a big deal in the early 1800s. And for this, he's known as the Liberator. But his big thing was achieving revolutionary change, but through peaceful means only. And as such, he's become a cult figure, and he was a inspiration to people like Gandhi, who referenced him in his autobiography, Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, the freed American slave, who was a big anti-slavery campaigner. Daniel O'Connell himself was a very big anti-slavery campaigner, which got him into a lot of trouble. He did get into quite a lot of trouble. The family have a habit of getting into trouble. And Daniel O'Connell rubbed the establishment up the wrong way many, many times. And out of that, the British Prime Minister at one stage called him that wayward Irishman. And that is where we have taken the name of our company from, Wayward Irish Spirits. And on our logo, we have Wayward since 1661, which is the date that our perfectly legitimate activity of importing wines and spirits became illegal because they brought excise duty in on it. So we wanted to reconnect with that family history. We have a farm here in Killarney, and I think you can probably see a picture of it, where we are.
Share this picture bigger. Yeah. I just need to open it, and then we can show it to everybody, because it's awesome. It's great to live on such a cool place.
Yeah. Well, the weather isn't always like that. You've been to Ireland, you know. For the last few days, it's been fairly rough. That was on a nice summer's day. But this is where we're based, on the shores of Loch Lean outside Killarney, and about 1820, when Daniel O'Connell got some political prominence, the family decided that we had to go legit, and we gave up the smuggling. And my branch of the family moved here to Killarney in 1820, and as it turns out, it's on land that was in my mother's family. She was a McCarthy, so between the two families, we can trace our living here for 900 years. So each generation has added something new to keep the place going. We wanted to start a business that connected with our passion for the land, and with our history, and we wanted to share that. And whiskey was, to us, a fairly obvious choice. We've been growing our own barley here. We have a farm here. We've been growing our own barley here for decades, but until now, it's been used for animal feed. And I thought, well, we've got to be able to do something better with the barley than give it to the cattle. So we started growing malting barley, which is a completely different product, completely different growing malting barley to ordinary barley, and it's been a huge learning curve. But we started doing that in about 2018, and the first of our barley was distilled for us into pot still spirit in early 2019. And Marika's showing you there the spirit pot still spirit from our 2019 harvest, which was distilled this year in May.
So we already has very nice color.
Isn't it nice color?
Yeah, it's very nice. I haven't tried it yet. I just put it all in the sample bottles.
Okay.
Because there are so many new things arriving that I can't try everything. So, and I'm also looking forward trying the tawny port later with you together. But the color is very nice, and it has very nice smell. So you can all look forward to it.
We have this distilled for us by Great Northern Distillery up in Dundalk at the moment, and they've been fantastic. Our first harvest was about 10 tons of barley, which is tiny in barley terms. And Great Northern Distillery have big silos for holding their barley, which are 30 tons each. So they had to empty 2 of these 30-ton silos to hold 5 tons each of my malted and my unmalted barley. But they were very keen to do it, and they've been fantastic. And the quality of the guys there, Brian Watts is a superb distiller, and it's very difficult it would be very difficult for me to afford that expertise myself. But what our plan is we have two sides to the business. First side is based on the grain that we grow on the estate, and this is, as I said, distilled at the moment for us into pot still by Great Northern. In 2024, we will bring the distillation in-house, and we will start Ireland's most beautiful single estate grain to glass distillery here in 2024. So that we're really excited about that prospect. But alongside that, we have a second that we'll only ever have a small amount of grain.
We have a question, and we have some comments, because you said the most scenic single estate. So we got comments like, it looks very nice, and then Julia says, driving from the road towards the castle is as stunning as it looks. Tina says Killarney National Park is fantastic, even with not sunny weather.
Yeah, well, we can provide that quite often.
And Kevin says, I've never been down around the area of the estate, but I hope to when I get a chance to go home. And he has also the question, have you different types of barley? This is why I was interrupting you before we go to the next business.
We in the first year we tried Olympus, and second year we tried Olympus and Laureate, and this year we've just gone for Laureate. The yield is pretty much the same on each of them, but we think we're getting a slightly better, slightly tastier spirit from the Laureate. And also the Laureate is a bit more resistant to the bad weather that we get here from time to time. So we're also planning to try some heritage grains of barley as well, but that's a bit further down the line.
I think that's also maybe easier when you have your own distillery and you can do smaller batches.
Yes.
Tina said Great Norther is doing a great job with helping other distilleries.
Yeah.
That's true, but it's a big distillery.
Yes, but they're really keen to help to try. I mean, if they show they can do things like mine, they show they can do anything basically.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's very interesting. And so you already have the plans to build up the distillery. You have the place where the
Yes,
pots
we've got the place. I think you might have a picture of that in there in that file somewhere through an archway.
I have. Let me check. I just found this picture. I don't know. Maybe this is also your storeroom.
Yes, that's our bonded storehouse. We call it a storehouse, and it's called the House of Contentment, because as you go into that area, there's an aerial photograph as well. As you go into that area, one of my ancestors put up a plaque in Chinese, which reads "House of Contentment," and I've always known that was there since a child. And it never really meant anything until my father-in-law went across to. He's living in Hong Kong at the time, and brought a rubbing of this plaque over with him. And they said to him, "You do realise that House of Contentment is another word in China for brothel." So this ancestor of mine had obviously been having a joke at our expense. So we thought it appropriate to call our bonded storehouse the House of Contentment. And the whiskey sleeps in there very happily. And actually, as it turns out, this was originally a cowshed. And as it turns out, it's got 2 foot thick walls, somewhat impractical for its purpose, but the 2 foot thick walls and the climate that we have here actually combine to make it a really interesting for whiskey maturation. The whiskey matures and by the spirit interacting with the wood, and that happens when it's above 7 degrees. In Scotland, you'll find that it's above 7 degrees for about 6 months of the year. What we have here is that we've been measuring it for the last 3 years, and it's above 7 degrees for 10 months of the year.
Wow.
So we get a very long maturation season.
Yeah.
What's more interesting is that where we are, we're on the shores of the lake, and on the other side of the lake is the Maclacuddy Reeks, which are Ireland's tallest range of mountains. So the Gulf Stream comes over those mountains, and it breaks on our land. It makes it very wet here, very rainy, which I've always found to be a complete pain until we started making whiskey.
Yeah.
But, and what we say here is that we have 4 seasons in a day. The weather changes dramatically and very frequently. But each of those changes in weather is a change in pressure, and each of those changes in pressure causes a different interaction between the spirit and the wood. So we can't prove it, but it should be making the maturation very individual here compared to a lot of other places. I mean, the weather changes are dramatic here, and sometimes it's beautiful. I mean, today the rain has been coming in horizontally. We've had great winds, and then suddenly it's still and beautiful. So you don't know where you are from 1 minute to the next.
That's right.
So that it turned out that maturation storehouse is actually really effective for what it is. Practically, it's actually a bit less effective, as we discovered a bit later on, because it's an old building. It's a protected building, and we only have 2 entrances to it. One is a loading bay, and it's 1.2 meters wide, and the pallets that whiskey barrels come in on are 1.3 meters wide.
Oh,
so,
no.
So everything has to be dealt with by hand,
Oh,
and it's fine. You get used to it. It's just we had
yeah.
planned for it to be a little more effective than that.
A
We
bit
also have,
exercise for everybody.
sorry.
A bit exercise for everybody.
Yeah, we have enough exercise, I think,
Yeah, I
without
know.
that. But we also have a ramp entrance into the storehouse, and we can get a forklift in there. We
Okay.
borrow a neighbour's forklift, but he has to take the roof off the forklift, which takes about an hour. And also when he gets inside, it's so narrow he cannot
Yeah.
turn. So everything has to be done by hand. Which is fine. It's part of the story. We're not producing huge amounts, so it's not an industrial process. So we don't need it to be mechanized at this stage. Uh, so alongside our own barley, we are whiskey bonders. And I don't know if the people on the call are probably familiar with that, but for those of you who aren't, bonding is an old tradition in Ireland
Mm.
whereby publicans and merchants would they buy wine and brandies and ports in barrels, and when those barrels had finished, when they sold the wine, when they sold the port and brandy, they would refill them with spirit from their local distillery, and they found that this actually created fantastic new whiskies, and so each merchant or publican would have his own house whiskey. And
Mm.
this is a tradition called whiskey bonding, and that's what we practice as well, alongside our grain to glass distillery, which will only ever be a small part of our production. We source young spirit from lots of different Irish distilleries, the best Irish distilleries, and we're building up a library of flavors from which we
Mm.
can craft new distinctive whiskies. Uh, and the whiskies that we are producing are very different to the spirit that comes into us.
Yeah.
And just to show you on this, if you look at, I don't know if you can see the color on
Mm.
this malt and tawny port whiskey. It is a fantastic red color. I find it astonishing every day I look at it. It is quite the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, apart from my wife and my son. So I better be careful
The
there.
color, it's not just the color. When we were sampling the bottles on Friday and we did the Liberator tasting set, it
Yeah.
was like, it smells so good. With every bottle we were pouring, it was like, oh, more port, and it was so lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the color, but you also have the smell of the port cask finish, which I
Yeah.
think was very nice.
Well, what was interesting about those and the way that they got that color was that we sourced really fresh tawny port casks. And basically, what we've been trying to do is trying to connect what we're doing with our history. So the casks that we buy have a connection with our family history. My wife has family in the north of Portugal. All their neighbors are the port wine families. So we're quite friendly with them, and that led us to getting these really fresh tawny port casks.
Mm.
And what we were lucky with there was that we were able to get the casks in Porto and have them disgorged and checked at a local cooperage and brought back here for refilling, and they were refilled within 3 weeks of them being
Mm.
disgorged, which is
Yeah,
very rare. If you're
that's good.
buying from a wholesaler,
Yeah,
it can be 6-9 months or so, and
yeah,
they've dried out. So that we were very lucky with that. But the Tawny Port casks, they're very old. They're about 25 years old, and they're very fragile. Yeah, it's been quite a learning curve
yeah.
dealing with those. But yeah, we're sort of getting there now.
Yeah, I think it's when you have those fresh tawny port cask, it's a totally different maturation than when you have this older port cask. Like you said, it's like 6 months, no spirit in there. Then the wood is dry and not
Yeah,
so fresh. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a learning how to finish whiskey in a very fresh cask, I can imagine.
Absolutely. And also the as we were watching it, it was getting darker and darker and darker and fruitier and fruitier. And we were very worried that we'd overdone it. And actually what we had to tone it down a bit by this is a vatted malt, so it's two single malts blended together, and basically about 78% of it is 2015 Great Northern Distillery malt whiskey, and it's that element of it that has been finished in these really fresh tawny port casks. The balance of it, 22%, is Cooley Distillery malt from 2006, and that it's a fantastic nose on it. Really fruity. The fruit is really intense. It's like there's a lot of figs in there, cherries, and there's also citrus in there, and pepper and spices. So,
Kevin has another question. So the port pipes are collected relatively soon after emptying, within a couple of weeks, correct? Yes.
That's right. Yes, they're not pipes. They're barrels. Yeah, they're 225 litre. Because we can't get anything bigger than 225 litres into the warehouse. So a 600 litre port pipe is not feasible for us. Maybe one day we'll grow up and we'll be able to get bigger barrels, but it works well for us.
Yeah, I think in the smaller ones, the maturation gets a bit faster. You get really nice color, and the smell is amazing. I really like it. So many dark fruits, but it's also light. It's not like light. It's like citrus fruits or cherry, but you also have on the other side these really dark, complex fruits. So very nice.
So the 22% of older Cooley malt in there softens it out a bit, I think, because the younger spirit on its own was a bit too spirity. So on the palate, I get the malt from the barley coming up, and there's also the port underneath that. There's maybe some more red currants in there rather than the figs on the palate. And it's.
I also get something like nuts, some roasted nuts. I don't know. I got it on the palate at the moment.
Yeah, hazelnuts.
It's a whiskey I really like. When you sent us the samples, I was like, oh, it's such a nice whiskey.
Oh, I'm really pleased about that. It's like somebody saying your child is beautiful.
It's like, and of course the color is amazing. But the taste is awesome, and it's like what Tina says. I tasted it last year at the Whiskey Life in Dublin and fell in love with it.
But it's an evolving process. We only produce in small batches. Each batch is an individual, and as you'll see from the inaugural release, which was 700 bottles, the batch 2 is 1,000 bottles. They're different. But we're trying to keep the the portiness of it, because basically my view was that if we weren't able to sell it, and if I had a storehouse full of whiskey, I at least wanted to make it whiskey that I would want to drink. So that
That's good.
self-interest was.
So Kevin tried already also one of the Liberators, the Tawny Port. I think I found on the nose also a musty note, could be from the maturation location.
It certainly is musty here. There's a lot of damp. It's very humid. Yeah, I don't get that myself, but
no.
Yeah, but it's entirely possible. We
I
are
also
very damp.
do not really get that, but every taste is different.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that we can have a Liberator tasting kit for the Irish Whiskey Weekend. And the Tawny Port is great. So for all the Germans who are watching, so the Tawny Port batch 1, where we have just a small amount of bottles, is 59.90 euros. And the batch 2 is 56, I think. No, 52.90 euros. So cheaper. And it's amazing. I think it's a very, very good price I did there.
Well, it was important to us to have value for money, because you can't build a reputation and a long-term business without that, I think. So I mean, it is a premium whiskey, but we wanted it at a price where people would say it's a good value. So I'm glad. And obviously your rates of excise duty are less in Germany than we have here. So that's.
So this one has 46%, and I have bottle 909 opened. I always like to check which numbers. So nearly number 1,000. Yeah. Very good. I also, it's very high quality labeling, and the bottle is really nice. I like it.
Yeah. So I mean, you don't realize these things when you go into it. The labeling and the bottle was the work of about a year.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The labels actually cost more than the bottle and than the glass bottle and the stopper.
Yeah.
But
the bottle is very nice. Very nice. It's so different.
Thank you. What we wanted to do was to we're an old family. We've got a lot of history behind us, but we want to be doing things in a modern way. We're not stuck in the past. So the bottle was the choice of bottle was to emphasize that it's modernizing the heritage. It's being modern but respecting the long history, but not being bound by it.
Yeah. That
was the thinking behind it. Whether anybody else gets that or not is
I can truly imagine that. I did a new single cask range at the beginning of the year, and I did a logo for that, and it also took about a year to figuring out that. So I can truly imagine what you are talking about.
But also if you listen to the opening of the bottle, the opening stopper is we went that took about 3 weeks of talking to decide on that. So there's been lots of talk gone into it. But we got our first whiskies into the storehouse in about September 2018, and we've been adding to them since, and we have other stocks elsewhere as well. But the idea is that we will mature as much as we can here on the estate, but we have to have stocks elsewhere as well, and we'll bring those down to the estate for finishing, blending, and bottling on site.
Yeah,
So it's quite good to be able to do your own blending and bottling on site, because you can do it because from the start of a batch to the end of the batch, the whiskey has matured a little more, so it is slightly different.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think at the moment Irish spirit business is growing, and a lot of the small ones don't have their own bottling line, and they need to look where space is at the bigger ones, and they are getting more full. So I think it's very important to have your own bottling and labeling. Maybe it takes a bit more time, but then you have it in your hand and you can do everything whenever it needs to be done.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about our whiskey bonding side, is that we try and control as much of the process as possible. So on the spirit we're buying, we're having that distilled to our specification in a number of cases, and so we're controlling it from there. We control the wood policy from the start, and then the finishing and the blending we control as well. So we try and keep as much of it under control as possible.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, so I have 3 more bottles here standing next to me. I showed this one already, and the other ones also don't have a label, and it caused me some problems on Friday night because we were assembling the whole day in another kitchen, which I rented, and then I throw all the bottles just in boxes, and then I wanted to check everything at home and was like, oh, they don't have a label and they are not in the boxes where they have been.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
So, and then this one was easy.
Yeah.
But the other ones were like, which one? Okay, one is cask strength, one not. So we have to try now and find out which one.
Right.
And then I just put some little stickers on them.
Oh dear. I was like, yeah, I will know in future, because we didn't have the labels to be able to do that when those were bottled. So so I thought putting them in the box would be safe, but obviously not. So
yeah, it was just after a long working day. We just wanted to pack everything, and I just went, box. Here's an empty box. Just put in the bottle, and then it was like, oh no, which one was now the double port and which one was the cask strength? So I figured it out, and maybe at first I want to say the viewers that the double port and the cask strength will be on the tasting kit for the Irish Whiskey Weekend. The cask strength is very special bottling, which won't be on sale here. And the double port will be on sale soon, but we can already talk a bit more about the double port to give the people, maybe you can show it with a label.
That's what it looks like when it has a proper label on, when we're not trying to confuse people with what it is.
Yeah, so maybe we can show the tawny port has the red label, so it's the
and this has the grey label. If I can put it to the right place,
the grey label for the blend.
Yeah. So this is a blended whiskey. But it's a premium blended whiskey. It is 42% malt whiskey, whereas most blends, a lot of standard blends will be somewhere around 10 to 15%. But we wanted to have a premium blend. We wanted to have something that had some complexity and depth to it, and that's why we blended it with such a large proportion of malt whiskey in it. So it's the components of it are the younger whiskies are from 2015, and they're from Great Northern, both the malt and the grain whiskey, and the But there are top notes of older whiskies from Cooley from 2006 and 2010 in there as well. It needed that to round it off. The younger whiskies, the malt whiskies were finished in tawny port casks, and the grain whiskies were finished in a combination of tawny and ruby port casks. So we brought some ruby element into it as well. So this is a much lighter, much more elegant, much more summery whiskey. I don't know whether you have a tradition of Christmas cake in Germany.
Not really.
Well, we have it in Ireland, and it's a fruit cake. Which is the malt and tawny port in the glass, basically. This is much lighter and much more easy drinking. It's quite elegant to my mind, and
you have more vanilla on the nose. You have lighter fruits, and
I get a lot of apple in there as well, and pear.
That's green, fresh apples.
Yeah. And somebody came up with this the other day, and actually it fits it exactly to my mind. Pepper sprinkled on strawberries.
Oh, so, yes.
That's a fantastic description, I thought, and
with vanilla ice cream.
Yep, and a bit of dark chocolate as well.
Yeah, the chocolate sauce over it.
And we have sweets here called pear drops. They're very they're sugar and pear basically. So I guess a lot of that in there as well. And there's a bit
Kevin prefers a higher malt ratio, so he will like it. So Kevin, you need to buy the tasting kit for the Irish Whiskey Weekend, and you can taste them. And Tina says the cask strengths. No, it won't be available at the moment. The cask strengths here in Germany, and I think
it's sold out. I'm afraid it was. We were trying to do with the malt and tawny port and the small batch, our blend, are our main lines. We're also doing occasional what we call storehouse specials, which are some interesting whiskies that we find in the back of the storehouse. And this cask strength version wasn't intended to be offered, but we were nosing it one day before we cut it to bottling strength, and we thought this is too good to waste. So we did a small bottling which sold out in Ireland quite quickly. So we might do some more of them again in the future, but it was very, very special.
German people like cask strength whiskeys, so maybe next year we can do a special release.
Yeah, everyone loves cask strength whiskeys.
Yeah.
The problem in Ireland is that the duty on them just makes it so expensive, and it's not practical as a mass market product. One of the things that we do when we get it from all of the whiskey is resting at cask strength in barrels at the moment, and we cut it down to bottling strength gently over a 5 to 6 week period, from under the suggestion of Julia Norney, who is online here today. She's very, very keen on that, and it actually makes a huge difference.
Yes.
It just makes such much smoother whiskey at the end of the day, and I mean I can now tell the difference from whiskies that have been just where they've just put the water in on one day, compared to where it's gone in gently over 5 to 6 weeks. It does, the cutting of it makes a huge difference, and I would never have guessed that. But I'm very, very pleased that we did find that in there.
Yeah, I think that's very important, that whiskey is cut it down very slowly from cask strengths. I tried lots of whiskeys which were cut down too fast, and you can taste it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have thought so. It sounds weird, but it is absolutely true.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a very good idea from her to do it in that way. Yeah, so it's really nice. But what I will do now is the cask strengths I will leave for the whiskey weekend, but I will have a taste of the new make now, because I'm so interested in that, and I would like to tell the people if it's good. I think it's good, but I have to taste it now. Just need to get a glass.
I don't have any of that. What I have in front of me here is the one that's from 2019. So look at the color that's come into that in the year beyond that. These we are maturing. The new make we're maturing in neoc casks. Which is another suggestion of Julia's. These are French wine Bordeaux casks, and I'm not allowed to say which chateau these are from, but it's from a chateau you would have heard of, and they are shaved and gently toasted. And it's actually they're fantastic barrels for maturation. So what do you?
Oh, it's amazing! It's such a lot of vanilla on the nose, and it doesn't smell like it's a cask strength, so it's very smooth on the nose.
But you know what we did, we had a stand at Whiskey Live in Dublin last year, and we had nothing to show, so we made up a few samples, and I took along that new make. And I cut it to 46%, just to give people something to taste at the show, and fantastic response to it. And I had one man come up to me and said, "Yeah, it's very nice, but it's a bit rough for an 8-year-old." And I said, "It's only 8 months." So
very good. It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm very, very pleased with that. I think that's down to Great Northern.
In a blind tasting, you could release that in cask strengths as a 4 or 5-year-old bourbon cask matured whiskey. No one would expect that it's not whiskey yet.
Yeah. Well, we're wondering whether, because I think the journey of a new make is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to get to a stage where maybe we've got a new make 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and then 3-year-old whiskey, just to see the progression.
It's great. I really like it. It's really, really good. It's you can taste that it was already some months in the cask.
Mm-hmm.
You still have a new make character, which is good because it's not already a fully matured whiskey. But you have grain notes, you have fruit notes, you have vanilla. I like it. Very good. And you have some pot still spices already in it.
Yeah. Well, we thought if we were doing something that was connected with the land, with Ireland, we might as well do a pot still. Because that is the archetypal Irish whiskey historically, so it seems to be the right thing to do. And we have quite a premium mash bill. We use 50% malted and 50% unmalted, which is quite a heavy malt proportion. And it's all our own grain. which is just stupidly expensive because it's
Yeah.
so much. It's just much easier, much cheaper to go out and buy it.
Yeah.
I can go and buy the malted barley for about €525 a ton. It costs me about first year. It costs €1,700 a ton to grow it.
Whoa.
Now we're down to 1,300. So
But
we're
still much
economy of the
more.
scale. It is still much more, but it's so important so that I can point to the field where that grows. That
Yeah.
what you're drinking came from our hilly field. And I think it's really important to be able to connect it like that.
It makes you very authentic. I really like how are you talking about your whiskeys. You were telling that you went to Great Northern make this new make. You're telling that the spirits from Cooley, from Great Northern, and you have casks, I don't know, maybe from Bushmills, I don't know. But you're talking about that very honestly, and I really like that. And
but people know anyway, so
yes, of course,
there's
but
no point in hiding it.
no,
And whiskey bonding is such an important part of the
yeah,
business. You look in Scotland, all the independent bottlers, they produce spirits that are better than the sum of their parts, and that's what we're going to try and do.
yeah,
And certainly, we're going to try and do things that are different. Uh, the malt in Tawny Port, it is very different to
yeah,
most
yeah,
of the port influence whiskies out there. But that's what we want to do, because there's no point in doing exactly the same as everyone else.
no,
But you do what you like, and you hope that other people will like it too. So.
yeah. Tina is asking if it is double or triple distilled. I think it's triple distilled.
It is triple distilled, yes.
Yeah.
So we have some double distilled coming up, and
Mhm.
in next year we should be old enough to come out then.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm really looking forward when this is fully matured and can be released as a whiskey. And yes, you can really say you are a grain to glass distillery because you have the fields, you have then the hand bottling, labeling, and as you said, you can point out the fields where the barley was grown. And then when you release, let's say, about 2,000 bottles of a batch of grain you have been growing in 2016, everyone thinks, yes, this is realistic. When you come out and say, I released 50,000 bottles from 2 grain fields, it's like, maybe not. Yeah.
No, that's why we explain that it's a hybrid business. We can't produce enough on the estate to make a realistic business. And when we started this back in about 2016, we were initially going to have a distillery. We were going to open a distillery, was the first plan, and we had someone lined up to come and do the distillation, and they had their own stills. But I'm glad that we didn't, because I think the route we've taken is a more interesting route anyway, rather than having to distill from day one.
Yeah. Great. So I'm really looking forward for what will be coming out next year. And now I'm really looking forward to start selling your whiskeys here in Germany.
I'm really looking forward to you doing that as well.
Yes, because last week we were so busy and I just wanted to set up everything right. And then we had already scheduled the stream, and I was like, okay, this time we do at first the stream, everybody can hear about it, and then we will start selling and putting out press releases. And I'm really looking forward to the next weeks, and I'm really looking forward to having you on the Irish Whiskey Weekend.
Thank you.
Having this masterclass with you and trying this excellent whiskeys. Thomas saying it's amazing to get the Liberator whiskey in Germany now.
Oh, yes. Thomas, yes. Hi, Thomas.
Yes, we will have it now, and we are really looking forward to it. And thank you very much for taking your time here. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, go out and buy the Liberator.
Yes,
basically.
of course. So thank you very much for taking your time talking about your business and your whiskeys. And I wish all the audience a very nice week, a nice evening. And my next stream will be up on Thursday. And there we were talking about Irish distilleries and whiskey bonding with Daniela Prack. She was writing a book about Irish whiskey. This will be the next stream. So thank you very much and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.